social and cultural phenomenon that quite honestly directly contrasts with mainstream media's often degrading, dehumanizing, and dismissive representation of blacks both in America and the indigenous peoples of Africa. So the film opens with the oral tradition. The oral tradition opens Black Panther. The film begins with storytelling between the father and son, T'Chaka and his son T'Challa, hearkening to the orality that is a mainstay in African communities as a way to preserve language and histories. King T'Chaka methodically relays the storied history of the fictional African nation of Wakanda, a country frequently referred to in the movie as hiding in plain sight. This short but visually mesmerizing introduction through historical scenes of civil wars, colonization by Western invaders in Africa, and the transatlantic slave trade demonstrate both the importance of knowing one's origins and ancestral history, and the paternal responsibility of a patriarch and leader to pass on important knowledge and the ways of seeing the world to his son and ultimately the generations that will live on after him. And normally, if I was in one of my classes, this is where I would show a clip of that opening scene just to give you some contextuality for how beautiful that moment is in the movie. Eventually, we are introduced in the film to the Black Panther and his trusted military advisor, General Nkoye, of the all-female fighting force, the Dora Milaje, as they rescue Africans from human traffickers and retrieve a fellow member of the Wakandan fighting forces, Nakia. All three then travel in a technologically advanced military aircraft that seems not of this world, think like Star Trek, to the breathtaking nation of Wakanda that is nestled safely and discreetly within vast rolling hill countries and forests. Wakanda, once revealed, is a marvel, play on words there, to behold. Its modern skyscrapers intermingled with thriving plant life, sleek speed of light rail public transportation whooshing comfortably in tranquil sunshine, makes one beg to question, could this really exist somewhere in Africa? Is this truly what the many nations in Africa, with all their rich natural resources, abundant agriculture and wildlife, could have been apart from colonization and foreign ravaging? Wakanda in the film, at the moment of its discovery for audiences, thus becomes a reference to both the possibility that lies within the borders of Africa and the pain of what the destructive forces of colonization have literally and figuratively stolen from the continent and its indigenous peoples. When asking, is this what African nations could have become, Chinua Achebe perhaps might provide an affirmative answer to that question. In his 1984 work, The Trouble with Nigeria, he paints a picture of his homeland, his country, as endowed with all the resources of success, but plagued by mediocrity, overpromising and underperforming leadership, corrupt citizens, and a lack of true, honest direction for their future. Like the father in the opening scenes of Black Panther, Achebe explains in the book's preface that his very impetus for writing the work is out of dedication to my children and their age mates throughout Nigeria, whose future the argument is all about. The inspiration and the vigor come from them, the weaknesses and flaws are mine. Achebe's fundamental position in the work is that Nigeria suffers from one primary problem, from which all others are birthed and connected. In the opening chapter of the book, titled Where the Problem Lies, Achebe very plainly shares the fundamental issue with his nation. He states, the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. He references the assassination of Murtala Muhammad in 1976, whom he believed with his strong, staunch military style of order and direction would be able to resolve the issues of economic disorganization and the lack of an effective functioning parliament and implementing a democratic system that supported protecting human rights after Nigeria gained its full independence from British rule through constitutions in the 1960s. This leadership problem that Achebe explains parallels the core plot dynamic that we see happening in Black Panther, which is centered upon the failure of leaders of the fictional nation of Wakanda to recognize the problem that hiding in plain sight has actually produced. For them as a small but advanced nation, not just for Africans, but for every other nation in the world. Wakanda has ignored the issues of the global community, particularly those members of African nations and the African diaspora who have and are suffering at the hands of colonizers. This quote of Achebe could easily be rewritten to read, the trouble with Wakanda is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. T'Challa, the incoming Black Panther who is heir to the throne, will discover and grapple with the choice of his father T'Chaka that he made not only to execute his brother Njobu for crimes against his country, but to then also leave his nephew in America and return to rule his kingdom as if the events never transpired, essentially hiding his crimes in plain sight. So continuing that metaphor. The leadership choice of the rulers of Wakanda is so problematic that Nakia, a member of the Wakandan fighting forces and daughter of a tribal leader of Wakanda, finds herself unable to return to Wakanda because of the suffering of those that exist outside of their nation, and those that the Wakandans label with distaste as outsiders. Achebe was right to suggest that it really is a leadership problem. In the film, an underlying cause of internal struggle and long and lingering tensions within Wakanda is the Jabari tribe. There's a picture of M'Baku here. He's my personal favorite for his cunning and his humor. What I can see is a play on the African trickster figure, because M'Baku always enters the narrative when there's a plot twist and things are not always as they seem. The audience has already learned in the opening of the film that the Jabari did not choose to follow the Black Panther as their leader, as the four other tribes did. As a tribe, the Jabari decided to resist the Black Panther's rule and become a dissenting group that stole away to the mountains. This lack of unity reflects the perceived issue of tribalism that is thought to plague African nations, where the commitment to ethnic groups and communal identities superimpose themselves on any attempt for genuine political parties within an African nation to engage in unity, thus destroying the development of nationhood and many times true democratic elections. Achebe, however, in The Trouble with Nigeria, cautions that unity is useful only so long as it works towards a purpose. He plainly denounced the idea that a united Nigeria was a Nigeria without any recognition of tribes, where he said that, but all this self-conscious wish to banish tribe has proved largely futile because a word will stay around for as long as there is work for it to do. Achebe suggested that the presence of individual tribes does not mean that one cannot be united as a nation if each tribe contributes to the success of the whole. He lamented the attempt to utterly eradicate tribes' existence in theory and in daily practice, and the film seems to echo the legitimacy of Achebe's perspective. In the film Black Panther, it would prove critically beneficial that the Jabari existed on the fringes of Wakandan society because they essentially saved T'Challa. When he is defeated in ritual combat by an outsider who's unidentified but an heir to the throne, he is washed to the shores of the Jabari community, rescued by a Jabari fisherman, kept alive by the Jabari king, and subsequently given the fighting force of Jabari warriors to defeat his opposition. The existence and connotation of tribe is thus not cursed for Africans as Western voyeurism and politics so often suggest, but it turns out to be a blessing. In The Trouble with Nigeria, Achebe acknowledges an inconvenient truth. He condemns his country for being a nation that is resistant to true changes and holding fast to a world of make-believe and unrealistic expectations. According to Achebe, Nigeria is not a great country. It is one of the most corrupt, insensitive, inefficient places under the sun. In short, it is among the most unpleasant places on earth. The leadership of Wakanda in the film is guilty of the same willful ignorance about the state of the world beyond its invisible force field. Although Wakanda is technologically advanced because it was formed on an alien mound of vibranium, it is set in its traditional ways and is hidden in plain sight to the detriment of those around them. The newly independent Nigeria that Achebe was deeply disappointed with in the 80s was literally in disrepair, and the film portrays how the futuristic nation of Wakanda is figuratively in disrepair. Because as T'Challa powerfully expresses to his ancestors when he takes the herb to travel to the ancestral plane, you were wrong. All of you were wrong to turn your backs on the rest of the world. We let the fear of our discovery stop us from doing what was right. No more. The ancestors, the leadership, failed to acknowledge that they could change the world and oppression of fellow blacks. They failed to realize that their greatness was, in fact, apathy and moral shame. The need for a patriot. All, however, is not lost. Achebe suggests throughout The Trouble with Nigeria that if the right individual comes into power, Nigeria can and will change. He describes the need for a patriot. A patriot is a person who loves his country. He is one who cares deeply about the happiness and well-being of his countries and its people. Symbolic patriots can be found all throughout Black Panther as a source of hope for Wakanda. But it's critical that we know that the hope is not the obvious Black Panther, but arguably the decidedly female warriors that surround him. Shuri is a patriot who has made numerous scientific discoveries with vibranium as a sister to the Black Panther. Her timing and ingenuity ultimately helped save the kingdom. Nkoye is a patriot who is considered by all Wakandans to be the greatest warrior, and her love of Wakanda is demonstrated when she is willing to fight her own lover, if necessary, to help put an end to their internal civil war. Nakia is the third female patriot who steals the heart-shaped herb to ensure the Black Panther can return to his former glory. Though Achebe in his text primarily praises male leaders like Murtala Muhammad and Democratic activist Aminu Kano, according to his definition as a true patriot, the women of Wakanda in the film are the symbolic epitome of the future of African leadership. Nevertheless, the troubled state of Nigeria existed, and some states still does in the 21st century because of the people of Nigeria that have not risen above mediocrity and a proclivity to corruption. Achebe concluded that Nigerians are what they are only because their leaders are not what they should be. They are essentially a monster of their own making, and T'Challa uses these exact words to describe the crisis of epic proportions that he must address in Killmonger, the son of his father's brother, a blood relative, and potential heir to the throne, a Wakandan who was raised and existed as an outsider because of the failure of Wakandan leadership. Through bloodshed and unspeakable acts, Killmonger arrives in Wakanda to take over the kingdom and the free and oppressed people all over the world. And although his cause is noble, his methods are proved deplorable. When he speaks in the throne room of his plan of world domination, the silence of the elders in the council that join him is deafening. In previous scenes, when T'Challa is in power, the elders are engaged in conversation with T'Challa as a respected leader. In the scene with Killmonger, however, only the younger generations dialogue with him. It speaks of their disapproval of what he is saying. It conveys that they do not see or recognize him as having the authority to hold a conversation in the presence of elders. They are there out of obligation. They are physically there with Killmonger, but spiritually with T'Challa. Although Killmonger is king, he has not earned their reverence or deference, nor does he possess enough social capital to receive their wisdom. Thus, the culturally symbolic act of giving and imparting wisdom from an elder to a descendant is in and of itself an honor that Killmonger never receives. Perhaps this is the ultimate signifier of his existence in the margins and as an outsider, that he wears the necklace of the Black Panther, that he met the ritual obligation to act in the role by defeating T'Challa, but he is never endowed as such by the elders in his own African community. The Trouble with Nigeria, thus, is an important work of Achebe because it is brutal in its honest assessment of the troubles in this country, but also beautiful in its relentless refusal to cast Nigeria off into hopelessness. Every few pages, Achebe offers a powerful conjunction, but he will not give up on his nation or its future. The power of possibility consumes the text, and he is hopeful that his homeland, the place God divinely birthed him, is positioned for greater. Regardless of all internal and external issues, poverty, lack of government security, so on and so forth, he courageously states, I also believe that, hopeless as she may seem today, Nigeria is not absolutely beyond redemption. Critical, yes, but not entirely hopeless. To pull her back and turn her around is clearly beyond the contrivance of mediocre leadership. It calls for greatness. Greatness for Achebe is synonymous with change, and the film parallels the sentiment. Only a different Black Panther, one not like his predecessors, can ensure a brighter future for Wakanda. Along with his female patriots, the final scene in the film that runs right after the ending credits in true Marvel superhero film fashion, he is shown delivering a speech to the United Nations that Wakanda is no longer hiding in plain sight. He has proven himself to be the solution to the leadership problem. And as an African leader, that if Achebe were alive to see the film today, he might perhaps just be proud of. Thank you.